Oddities, welcome back to another episode of Midnight Curiosities. I'm Curator Raquel.
And I'm Curator Warbeauty.
Coming at you live. I'm inside a French castle.
Oh, a French castle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been to France.
I know.
And I have to tell you, I took a picture of myself because I carried this fan everywhere. It was kind of warm. It was August. Yeah. And I went to Versailles. Mm-hmm. So my hair's really short right now, but I have...
Do you mean like a hand fan?
Yes. Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
A hand fan.
Okay.
Extra as hell.
Oh, you always are.
And I was in Versailles, which is just absolutely the most gaudy, amazing French...
It's perfect for you.
Everything I've ever wanted. I didn't know that I wanted to be a princess so bad until I went to Versailles.
Okay.
So I'm sitting outside in Versailles, and my hair is super long, like down the middle of my back. It's sweltering hot.
Right,
There's a lot of tourists everywhere. And I have this hand fan.
Of course.
And I said, felt like a French princess, looked like an American tourist.
Amazing.
France is great.
I love that for you.
Actually,
I've never been to France.
I really think people, if you ever get a chance, should go and experience France. But in the low-key, not tourist kind of way.
Yeah.
I found the French people to be incredibly polite and delightful. I thought that the French were so lovely.
Aren't they, known to be polite and delightful?
No, well, there's, the American stereotype of the snooty, snobby Frenchman.
Right.
But I didn't find that to be the case at all.
I've known many a Frenchman.
But see, so you're not tainted by this stereotype that we have here in the States. And I won't say... I've lived and traveled the world, so I obviously understand the French are probably not the stereotype. But... the stereotype really does shock me because if you observe a few of their very easy to observe customs,
yeah,
I thought Parisians and the French were extraordinarily kind. They were graceful. They have elegance. Their standards are quite high.
I've always considered them to be quite elegant.
They're very elegant people
because of their big, beautiful castles.
Is that
you talk about France a lot?
France really. So that was a trip that really changed my life.
Because you were talking about Nostradamus a lot.
Yeah, Nostradamus.
I remember
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
And it was really a magnificent... It was my first time in Europe.
Oh, okay.
Was France. And so experiencing European culture and the sensations was just... It was everything. I would live there. France was so beautiful. I went to the gardens in... Giverny.
Oh, yeah, you were telling me about these.
Oh, man. That was...
We were talking about art museums and places to visit.
So, low-key...
I love art.
Right. I'm low-key kind of internally pretentious a little bit, and I like to be...
You? I'm shocked. Color me surprised.
Right. So, I thought just Giverny, that was Claude Monet's gardens.
Right.
And they were just... beautiful. And the way of living there is just, it's so different. The mentality, the vibe, it's all so different to what we experience here, particularly on the East Coast. So I'm from the West Coast of America, and even that is drastically different than the East Coast of America.
Because America's so big, we have so many different cultures.
Right. I found that France was more akin to what I was used to on the West Coast in terms of, chillness. But it definitely, aside from being very,
all French confirmed surfers.
Yeah, all French confirmed surfers. Which is fun. I actually know a French surfing filmmaker.
That is quite the sentence.
Yeah.
All right, I'm here for it. I like it.
Yeah. They're just, what a great people. What a great, sexy language, too.
I studied French for a while in college.
Ah, parlez-vous français?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
I failed it my first semester.
I do vu français.
I do. Well, my dad also took French a lot in college, so he fancies himself, can speak it, but can't speak it. He learned... He knows maybe, 2 or 3 sentences.
That's all you really need.
Yeah.
As long as you know the basics and you can get around...
No, one of the sentences he knows is there are clouds in the sky.
And
it's not a useful one.
That's a very important thing. There are clouds in the sky. Could mean rain.
Could mean rain.
That feels like really important meteorological...
Keep trying.
Meteorological information.
Okay. The French are a real big meteorologist, we all know.
Yeah, it's part of their culture is
Right, of course.
weather accuracy.
So it's interesting that we're talking about the French culture and French men in particular, because our topic for today is a very famous French man, Nostradamus.
Yes, it is. Which is funny because Nostradamus is not a French name.
Oh, really?
No. So, Nostradamus, for those
who don't know who he is.
Right, because you either, like, know who Nostradamus is,
You're
or you
either,
have
like,
no clue.
super into it, or you don't know. So, correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't do the research for this episode. Wasn't he a physician in French court for a while?
Yes, actually, for a long while.
Yeah.
So,
until he got kicked out for being, like, a heretic with Catherine de Medici. Is that correct?
okay, so...
I might be confusing fantasy and reality because there's a TV show that I'm super into.
You are.
Okay,
You're
cool.
definitely confusing it. But
Okay, cool.
not totally inaccurate, but also not accurate.
Okay, correct. What part was I wrong about?
Okay, so well, I think it's first important to explain who Nostradamus was.
He was
Nostradamus
a physician.
was a physician and a very famous seer or divinator or prophesier.
Prophet.
He actually rejected the use of the word prophet when it came to him, though. He actively refused to be acknowledged as a prophet because he didn't feel that he fit the archetype of prophet.
Very humble.
Right. Also, keep in mind, Nostradamus was alive during the Inquisition age.
Okay.
So he
right.
had to
Right,
really
so he had
skirt-
to keep that name off of him so that he wouldn't be considered a heretic.
Yes.
It was
and-
during the time of, like, the Catholics versus Protestants, right? In France?
Yes. And he actually was jailed for a little bit, but he was never actually inquisitioned, and pretty much he was never really a heretic, and the church never really came after him.
Good.
So Nostradamus is a Frenchman, as we know.
With a non-French name.
Actually, he has a French name.
You just said it wasn't French.
No, Nostradamus is not French. What people don't know is that Nostradamus, and okay, I gotta tell you, William Shatner messed this up when he did his Nostradamus, like, he used to host that mystery show or whatever,
Okay.
and he said his French name, but he said de Nostradamus, and that's not Nostradamus's name. And I was like, how are you gonna get his actual French name, but then make it the not French version?
Okay. I love that.
So just know William Shatner messed this up, and I giggled.
Okay.
Nostradamus' actual name is Michel de Nostradam. Mm-hmm. And because he was Catholic, he Latinized it at the time when Latin was the thing.
I see.
He Latinized it to Nostradamus.
Okay.
So his actual name is de Nostradam.
Okay. Good for him.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said, good for you, guy.
Good for him. So,
Good for you, Nostradamus.
so you mentioned that he was a physician. He did things like just basic medicine kind of thing. He was a healer.
Well, okay, so what a lot of people don't know about Nostradamus, even people who are into the prophecies that he wrote, is Nostradamus was actually an academic and a scholar and an actual no-nonsense physician, like
Right,
school.
an actual doctor.
Yeah, this guy actually knew what he was doing.
Yes.
He was also an astrologer.
Possibly.
He was astrologer, I think. Because that was like a thing back then. You could be an astrologer.
And it tends to follow the format for, like, a scholar.
Right.
They tend to get
stars.
fascinated by the stars.
Yeah, so he studied the stars, and he would often see, because that's also, too, ancient medicine would rely on planetary alignments
Right.
and events to diagnose people.
Right.
So he very much followed that, but he was known as a terrible astrologer.
Good.
He was known as like a fraudulent, bad astrologer by all of the big named astrologers.
Aw, poor thing.
In his book, he even takes time out in the end of his book to slam noted astrologers.
Good.
He really just disses them. He hates them.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
So Nostradamus
I love
is like
that.
high-key iconic because you don't know the name of the astrologers he slammed, but you know Nostradamus.
He straight up, like, dropped a diss track on them.
Yeah, so he not only does he slam actual, like, noted famous astrologers in his big famous everybody knows book.
Right.
So he was considered a bad astrologer, and people would go to him because he was a physician and an apothecary before he was a seer. And they would be like, yes, tell me my things, Michel de Notre Dame. And he would make them bring their own birth chart. Whereas most astrologers at the time charted it for you, but he was known to be so wildly inaccurate that you couldn't rely on his birth charts. Because he would just not take into account time of day that you were born.
Oh my gosh. You know, he did a lot of great things. You can't be great at everything.
Well, so we're going to get into this because I think Nostradamus is really fascinating as a prophet and seer for this reason. But it's really important to understand he was kind of the joke of the astrology field because...
Poor thing.
Just, he'd be like, yes, planetary alignment. We don't know her.
Never met her.
Never met her.
Good.
And he would kind of do that, like, the fake horoscope, or the fake horoscope.
Oh no, that all came back from him?
Well, kind of. But he would do, like, the fake nonsense horoscope stuff.
So,
and
like,
be like, yes,
You're a Taurus, so you're, I don't know, gonna eat, like, 12 carbs today.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Based off of nonsense, allegedly.
Good.
Now, of course, we are hearing a lot of stuff after the fact, and a lot of people thought he was,
bonkers.
So they're going to say some not nice things. But what's really interesting is that Nostradamus was actually taken seriously in academia as a scholar and a physician. Just because his astrology was not on point.
Again, you can't be great at everything.
Right.
But he was great at some things.
He actually got kicked out of school because when he went to... Because, like, the plague broke out. It's kind of ruined
of course. Don't I know it?
Right. I hate it when the plague just ruins everything. Cough, cough. Can't relate, Nostradamus. So...
What a far-fetched reality you have
couldn't even imagine.
Woven for us.
So, Nostradamus ends up getting kicked out of school, out of, like, his grad school for his PhD... because he practiced, like, the one thing that they didn't allow.
Astronomy?
Apothecary.
Oh.
Yeah. The school actually actively did not let their students be apothecaries. And so he was kicked out for being a legitimate, old-timey pharmacist.
A rebel.
And he was a rebel.
Good for him.
Right. So... I think he's so fascinating because then after that, he then wrote a bunch of, like...
Prophecies. So that's the part that we're here to talk about, right. Obviously.
But I really wanted to establish kind of a little bit of his background because...
Sure. He's a very interesting person, prophecies aside.
It's important when you discuss his prophecies, kind of...
To know where he's coming from.
How he was able to divine things.
Okay. But apparently not from the stars, because he was very bad at that.
Well, not true.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you.
He was. I mean, okay, it's not true that he was. He was
a bad astronomer.
Allegedly bad at astrology. He was a bad astrologer. But I have a personal theory about how I think Nostradamus did this.
I love personal theories on this show.
I do. So, let's talk about his book a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so his book is Les Prophéties, or The Prophecies. And the way that they were written...
Really, really repelled against that prophet title, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, Nostradamus lived in, the 1500s?
Good for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I would also lean into it.
Well, essentially what he did, so apparently, and I didn't know this, making prophecies and divination were not against the church. Mm-hmm. That the Inquisition didn't come after you for that, which I think is really... fascinating. I don't know. I guess I kind of expected them to all consider it heretical witchcraft. But I understand why they didn't. I just think it's interesting.
It is interesting because they considered a lot of things heresy that weren't. That just went against their personal political agendas.
Right. So really, when you think about it, not to get into 1500s politics, but...
Fucking do it.
The Inquisition...
Coward.
Not to bring this up again, but we all know what the Inquisition really was.
Oh, God. Okay. But so his book, Les Prophéties, Les
Prophéties? Les Prophéties. You just say prophecies with a French accent, and everyone will believe that you're correct. So, Les Prophéties is written in the style of quatrain. Now, what is a quatrain? Sounds like a sick dance move from the 90s.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm with you.
So, quatrains are basically elaborate poems.
Okay.
And Nostradamus...
Like an epic?
Kind of. So, Nostradamus was kind of trying to skirt the church heavily.
You can't blame him for that.
While prophesying wasn't unaccepted and didn't make you a target of the Inquisition, you still had to be careful with it, because there's obviously, like, who knows where that line was for them.
Sure, I mean, you can be a prophet of the Lord.
Right, and that would have gotten you burned at the stake.
He wasn't.
No.
No.
So, he wrote these prophecies in quatrains format, and they're very difficult to read. And this is why they're kind of the subject of so much mystery and debate to these days. Because not only did he write les prophéties in French, he wrote them in Greek, he wrote them in Latin, he wrote them in several languages.
Trying to get that, like, widespread audience?
No, he wrote it as a puzzle.
Oh,
so people couldn't translate his book easily, because he didn't want the church to persecute him.
Whoa, that's actually super cool. I did not know that.
Yeah, he did not.
That's super interesting.
He feared persecution so heavily that he wrote his book in several languages, and then on top of writing in different languages, he wrote it in an epic poem impossible format called quatrains, which is a very high scholarly level format to write in. So, I mean, this was brilliant how he kind of got away with this.
Yeah.
And the level of dedication and work that went into this is bananas. It's literally mind-blowing.
That's amazing.
And he originally started because people were like, you should publish an almanac, right? So they're like, oh, publish an almanac. And he was like, okay, let me publish the almanac. And then it ended up being super popular that he made these predictions, even though he was just a trash astrologer. And it eventually culminated in him kind of quitting his day job and becoming a full-time prophet. Right.
Sure.
But
okay.
It's interesting to note how he did it, because Nostradamus himself has even said, I don't enter a trance state to receive prophecy.
Alright, I'm gonna say something.
I'm ready.
And you have to tell me if it was based on the TV show that I watched, or if it was a true thing that Nostradamus did.
Okay.
Did he...
I don't know. What did they do to him on this TV show? Because, I mean, he probably did it, let's just be real.
If his prophecies didn't come naturally to him, he would bring himself as close to death as possible to kind of force them.
Okay. Maybe?
Okay, so that's TV.
Yeah.
That's Hollywood. Okay. Well, it's worth a shot.
Because, okay,
that's my canon for Nostradamus.
So here's the deal. So we're talking about Nostradamus, but I think it's really important to talk about prophecy and sort of the vehicle of prophecy.
Of course.
And what this really looks like. We always assume prophecy to be this, like, oracular, ecstatic...
Like a lightning bolt to the head kind of, like, epiphany situation.
Right, and movies in Hollywood, again, the Hollywood lens really does a disservice to a lot of metaphysical events, in that it is this, like, big experience that very few people can have.
Right.
And that it requires, like, a super deep trance, and you have to, like, have these, like, seizure-inducing levels of
right.
being touched by the gods. Okay, well, that's actually not...
That's fake news.
That can happen.
Sure.
And it still does happen worldwide today. Don't think that that's incorrect. What they don't tell you, though, is that prophecy it's a technical art skill and a technical form. And you can be trained to make predictions. Think about what Nostradamus knew. Michel de Nostradame was a scientist. He knew the body. He knew plants and medicine.
He didn't know planets.
Allegedly didn't know. No, he didn't know... I think that he knew planets, but not in the way people wanted him to know planets.
That's fair.
I think he understood big celestial events, star alignments. I think he had a natural understanding of how certain planetary alignments affect not only the body and medicine. As a scientist and a physician, he would understand that to some degree.
Yeah.
I think he also then had the genius to scale it out and be like, wait, every time these planets do this, certain historical events happen. So if that is true going backwards, why would it not be true going forwards?
Makes sense.
And I think that he used elite observation and elite scientific skill to kind of offset the need to trance to predict big events.
So you think he took prophesizing and made it a science?
Absolutely. And I think prophecy is a science to some extent.
Yeah.
There's obviously, I think that there is some bit of a paranormal, supernatural
gift.
Yeah, there is an element of that to it.
Of course.
But on the whole, I really believe that he made predictions based in science. It's the same way we predict the weather.
It's the same as learning how to read patterns and predict patterns.
Yes, and he was a master at that. And so that's really, and I think that kind of rubs everybody the wrong way. When you boil something so kind of supernatural down to science, everyone hates that.
But that's all it ever is.
Well, right.
That's what this podcast is. That's what our whole mission statement is, pretty much, is it's all science.
It's right, and so that's what we're here to explain. It really is all science. So when you consider Nostradamus, you can, buy into some of that fanatical, crazy, interesting stuff.
Because make it sexy.
Make it sexy, because there is certainly an element of that. But understand at the heart of the quatrains and the way you have to understand his mindset of how he prophesied, it was science. He used science.
Let's talk about his prophecies.
Let's talk about the quatrains, shall we? So Nostradamus is most famous for having, quote, I'm using air quotes here, quote unquote, predicted Hitler, Napoleon, September 11th, all kinds of things.
Okay.
So here's...
Do you think it's an effect of, like, hindsight is where you, like, after things happen, you can look at the prophecies and be like, that could have been in reference to this thing that happened?
Yes and no. So, I was about to say that, actually. So, in hindsight, and this is where a lot of Nostradamus and prophecy critics come in, is that his prophecies were extraordinarily vague. Some parts were insanely specific. Some were extraordinarily vague.
Do you have an example of a specific one, just because I am curious?
I do, but we're going to get into that in a second.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so excited.
But
I feel like a listener.
His critics are really vague. Or his criticism is he's too vague. It could apply to anything.
Right.
Right. And that's true. So let's take, so this was 2020 we just came out of. And for the first time in 800 years, Saturn and Jupiter were about just a little less than a full moon in our earthly night sky's diameter apart. Mm-hmm. That event has not happened since 1226. In 1226, there was a monk and priest by the name of Francis of Assisi.
You love this man.
I love this man. So cool. Can't get off this story. But he got the first ever recorded and only one of two ever officially acknowledged cases of what is called stigmata. And stigmata being the holy wounds of Christ inflicted on mortal bodies via angelic means. So the angels come and they say, you're so holy, I'm going to give you Christ's wounds.
What a blessing.
Right.
What a gift. I'm going to stab you in the hands.
Such gift. Much blessing. Right. So if you look at the patterns of and this is just to show you kind of planetary celestial planet patterns, and the Saturn-Jupiter alignment is also known as the Star of Bethlehem.
Right. All of which was, by the way, before Nostradamus' time.
Right. So if you look at planetary events like that, mm-hmm. and you can predict they were very accurate with planetary predictions, yes. Because it really is math and science at the end of the day.
Right.
They could predict it down to the centimeter and the time and the day.
Right.
So I think that's all he did, was he used ancient planetary alignments and he looked at big celestial events and said, going forward, this is going to happen this year. This is going to happen this year.
Did he predict the convergence to happen this year?
I actually haven't read.
Oh.
I sadly don't keep up with all of his prophecies.
What are you even doing with your life?
I know. I
spend all your time hunting neo-Nazis when you could be tracking Nostradamuses.
Shame. For shame. But, so now that we have that, his prophecies are are vague. That's the biggest criticism. They could apply to anything.
Sure.
But that's what happens when you have planetary alignments in certain things. So, vaguely, we could have told you, well, every 20s decade, a plague breaks out or some sort of mass illness breaks out. And 2020 kept that same pattern. So, I think that's really what he did, was he kind of saw patterns at a very advanced level.
Okay.
Which is why his prophecies have, quote-unquote, come true. Because he was able to accurately predict patterns. Now, let's talk about specific quadrants.
Let's talk about specific
So here's the deal.
I'm so excited.
It was said that Nostradamus predicted 3 antichrists. And I think this is kind of the most interesting of all.
Can I give you a weird little side note real quick?
Yeah.
When I first met you, you were on this huge Nostradamus kick.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Because I was watching...
You were watching the Nostradamus Effect on Hulu.
I was watching the Nostradamus Effect on Hulu. Because I just wanted to rewatch it, because it was so good. I mean, it's like... I'm not going to lie, I kind of buy into it.
Yeah? I haven't seen it.
Yeah. You should, because you'll buy into it. Like me.
You bet I will.
Yeah, I'm all about some Michel de Nostradamus.
Okay, so 3 antichrists...
He predicted 3 antichrists. Now, this is very specific quatrains, and this is very specific prophesying that he did, because he even gave, names and numbers and looks and battles, and he described them in a way. So, he gives 3 very specific antichrists. So, in the Bible, there is, and keep in mind, Nostradamus was Catholic. So, in the Bible, there is predicted to be the Antichrist, meaning only one Antichrist that comes in an end of the world and yada, yada, yada. Okay, if you're curious, please read the book of Revelations. I recommend the King James Version of the Bible. But Nostradamus predicted 3. So 2 that would culminate into one Antichrist, into the final Antichrist. And so the first one, and of course, this is all sort of hindsight, but not hindsight at the same time, and I'll explain in a second, was Napoleon. And Napoleon actually knew that Nostradamus had, quote-unquote, predicted him.
Good. I would wear it like a badge of honor.
He did. And this is part of what's called the Nostradamus effect, is that people get really seduced by these vague prophecies.
It's the mystery. It's sexy.
Right. And to think, when you start matching and lining up with what some crazy old French dude might have said, and Napoleon himself was French, so imagine that this was very incredibly sexy for Napoleon.
Sure.
In that he was like, oh, well, I'm the first Antichrist. I am this. And Napoleon played it up. So you have to think, if Napoleon had never known that, if that book had never been, if he had never read the quatrain, what really could have happened in Napoleon's reign? Would it have still, and this is the great prophecy question.
Right.
If Napoleon never knew that he was the first Antichrist, would he have even been the first Antichrist?
Yeah. Would he have acted the same way?
Would he have acted the same way?
There's no way to know.
And there's no way to know. And that's really interesting.
Fascinating.
Right. And of course, that's more of a philosophical debate at this point. But the second Antichrist was Hitler, who also knew of the Nostradamus effect. And Adolf Hitler also was obsessed with Nostradamus and his prophecies.
So step 1 to be the Antichrist is to be a big fan of Nostradamus.
We're already...
looking at you, War Beauty.
Already kind of there. And it's interesting to me because Napoleon knew it and played it up. Hitler knew it and played it up. And that's something I think a lot of people don't know, is that those 2 quote-unquote antichrists that were predicted knew that they were predicted and then also played into it.
Who's the third one?
Nobody knows. So I'm not going to read quatrains here for you guys because, frankly, and we'll get into the translation problems in a minute, but there's so many. It's interesting that these 2 what are considered great and not very good men, to say the least,
great and terrible men
played up their greatness and their terribleness because Nostradamus predicted them. There is a third Antichrist who is allegedly due any day now.
Oh boy, that's just what we need.
He's allegedly been due, based off of the distance timing of Napoleon and Hitler and sort of how the quatrains have played out. So he may already be among us. We have no idea, actually, and I don't think we will until hindsight. But there is a third that's supposed to be the worst of them all.
Good.
And he's...
I love that for us.
Right. Great. So happy. Thanks, Nostradamus. And he is supposed to be kind of the end. The Antichrist. This is like the Antichrist that the Bible predicted.
The Bible.
Right. So that's this guy is supposed to be the final. And the two leading up paved the way for him.
Sounds lit.
I have a theory who it is, but I'm not going to say it on the show.
Political?
Because it's really political.
I know what you're thinking.
Right. So just if you understand...
If you know, you know.
just go Google it and you'll see.
It's true.
So that's my personal theory.
Are we going to talk about his predictions for 2021? Oh. This is our first podcast of the new year.
Yes.
It is now 2021, and we have some Nostradamus predictions in store for us.
We've got some hot Nostradamus predictions live for you guys right here, not live.
Here's the thing. They're not great.
Hey, guys, fair warning.
Great.
Nobody ever prophesies happy stuff.
That's true.
Nobody ever says, wow, you know what? I think the world could use some good news. Let me psychically divine greatness, like the good news.
So my question is, how do we know that? Did he write down in 2021 this will happen?
Okay, so he did actually give years.
Oh.
Yes. But here's the problem is that a lot of it is not real.
Well, yeah, 2021 doesn't sound like a real year.
Well, no. What I'm saying is a lot of his prophecies
it's just made up stuff.
His prophecies.
Wait, what?
Yeah, okay, so here's the problem with Nostradamus that I'm going to get into, I said I was going to get into in a minute, is people fanaticize so heavily over prophetical works. He is so heavily misunderstood because prophecy is misunderstood.
Right.
That haters and fans alike, and the way he wrote it was cryptic and in different languages. It has been mistranslated on accident and on purpose, and it has been rewritten to make predictions seem a lot more...
To discredit him.
Yes, to make him a lot more world-ending.
The scandal.
1500s politics, man, I don't know what to tell you.
Okay. But that doesn't change the fact we are still left with these prophecies.
We still have them.
We still have them, and of course, if they come true is yet to be seen. Do you want me to go through these?
You can if you want, yeah.
Alright, so the first one is a plague. Well, actually, do you want to go, in order? Because the first one is the zombie apocalypse.
Which is lit.
I can't wait. It sounds great. So, I believe what it actually says is young people will be half dead to give a start. I don't see how the natural conclusion to that is the zombie apocalypse. Personally, I think it could be something more related to, I don't know, a social commentary on caffeine use and not enough sleep and how we're all kind of half dead anyway.
Right, and it's interesting you say that because that's a commentary on prophecy that is really lost when speaking about it, is that yes, you can take it in the most fantastical way you can, oh my gosh, half dead, with their skin rotting and zombie apocalypse.
Right.
But imagine you're a 1500s French philosopher who, you don't know what a cell phone is.
Right, and you get this image of people who aren't getting enough sleep and who are very stressed out all the time.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, too, what people don't know about prophecy, as someone who has done divination, it is not always just images. You don't watch it like a movie. Even movies, you watch a movie, you feel the emotion the movie is making you feel. Divinators, prophesiers, feel that emotion. So imagine, half dead. Well, that's like every millennial ever.
Exactly.
Half dead.
Exactly. And so for Nostradamus, that could have been this huge thing of, oh my gosh, the whole population is half dead.
That would be devastating.
It's terrifying. But that's kind of just the world we live in now.
Right, so it doesn't seem to us like anything, and we wish it were fantastical, but...
It's probably not the zombie apocalypse.
In the 1500s France, I imagine that the way we act, think, feel, and the way we experience our reality would be devastating to them. You know, they got to experience a more natural world.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it was all sunshine and roses for them, but it was very different.
It's very different. So I imagine that our lifestyle was quite a surprise for him, enough for him to write about.
Right.
The plague is an interesting one. You kind of touched on this earlier about how every 20s year brings about a plague.
Yep.
So if he predicted that, then that was just his understanding of science and history and astronomy that he was quite bad at. Oh, famine. Oh, here we go. Okay. The great mover renews the ages. Rain, blood, milk, famine, steel, and plague. Is the heavens fire seen, a long spark running. Isn't that the asteroid?
I think so.
So we have a plague and an asteroid coming for us in 2021. Which, honestly, probably.
Come on, asteroid.
No, I mean, like, probably. If you think about how he was, like, super attuned to the universe, to the astronomical world, like, if he could make those predictions of there will be a plague every 100 years on the 20s, like, why wouldn't he be able to make the same prediction of there will be an asteroid? And it doesn't say a great asteroid will hit the Earth and kill us all. It'll say, we'll see one. I don't doubt that.
Well, I mean...
It doesn't say...
What, like Christmas Day, they had the asteroid that just zipped right past Earth, and then in November, you had the one that was only about 250 miles over the Pacific on Friday the 13th.
Right, so that's what I'm saying is, of course you can predict an asteroid because those aren't super uncommon for us.
Right, and he didn't necessarily say that it would bring destruction. He just said you would see it.
There would be one. So the only real questionable one is the famine and raining blood from the skies.
Okay, but... You know, in famine this year, because of coronavirus...
Because of the plague that he predicted, famine is a part of that. Maybe it's poverty that he's seeing.
Well, right. You know, millions more Americans have gone to food banks than ever before.
Right.
That is famine.
Right.
You know, we don't consider it famine because we have been sold this very Hollywood image. Again, there is this type of famine in the world.
Of course there is.
In America, famine is not going to look like those places. Famine is going to look like people lining up for food banks. It's going to look, and I mean, it will eventually look like, you know, dried up desert, nothing to eat. But right now, we haven't hit that point.
Before we close out, do you want to talk about kind of the metaphysical aspect of prophecy and kind of like a little taking the magic aspect out of it as what prophecy is? It's a science. It is a learned skill. It's not what Hollywood says it is.
Right.
I just want to leave him with more like a teaching moment.
Sure. Clarify a little bit for me what you mean.
Because, I mean, we have these Nostradamus prophecies, and obviously they're very magnificent and grand and sexy and mysterious to all of us, and we want more. We want to learn more. We want to believe the fantastical aspect of it. But that's not really what prophecy is, and it's not as uncommon. Nostradamus wasn't the only prophet of his time, and he's not the only prophet that we hear of today. Like...
Oh, sure. Now, this gets into a bit of a touchy subject because, obviously, thanks to the rise of the Catholic Church and things like the Inquisition, we are taught that prophets are these people that are touched by God and they are their own breed.
Well, we also have a modern problem of people claiming to be prophets are generally branded as mentally ill.
Right, and here's my question for all you viewers out there who may be skeptical about prophecy. If you genuinely, in your heart, believe that, say, and I'm going to use this example, if you believe that Jesus was genuinely a prophet, why would there not be other prophets after Jesus? Why would, at some point in history, why would prophecy have stopped?
Well, there were other prophets alongside Jesus.
Well, right. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, we think of prophets in a really old-timey sense.
And very grand, like, sense.
Yes. Why in 2021, which is today...
Wild.
Why in 2021 would we not still have prophets? That makes absolutely no sense. For all of a sudden, for there to just be this lack of people who can prophesy and who can naturally and gain the technical skills to make predictions and prophecies. But think also smaller scale, because you have like village seers and people who are seers. Seers can prophesy a lot of times.
Of course.
And that's their primary function as a seer, is to see. And that still goes on. So, from a more sciencey technical aspect, you've got people who have extraordinary levels of observational skills and extraordinary levels of pattern detection. When you have someone who understands intimately the particular culture that you're a part of, like let's say you're in a village or something, they understand the culture, they understand the deities, they understand the way of life.
Sure.
They're going to be very in tune with the patterns and with predictions of what is going to become of you and the people around them.
Right.
Because they're very in tune with people.
Final rating, Nostradamus. Good or bad?
Oh, I love Nostradamus. Good. I think he's great.
Nostradamus. Good at being a physician, bad at astronomy. Astrology. Not the best.
Debatable. I think that his critics do him a disservice, and I think he kind of used astrology as a scape, because being an astrologer was an accepted profession and a science at the time. I think it was a way for him to be like, oh yeah, I know things, church, don't kill me. So I think he may not have actually been a big time astrologer. I think he was just skirting the church.
So this has been Midnight Curiosities. I am Curator Raquel.
And I'm Curator Warbeauty.
Midnight Curiosities is hosted by One Eye Oddities, a new way to see magic. We will see you guys next week, and as always, become an oddity.
And
I stole it from you.
I was waiting for her lead up. And as always, don't forget to, and then I would say become an oddity, and then she just...
I don't have a script, okay?
But as always, don't forget to become an oddity. Thanks, guys. Subscribe, hit the like button.
If you could leave a review on iTunes, that would be incredible. Tell your friends about us. Get the word out. Yeah. Do your job. You're an oddity.
Be odd.
Be an oddity. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.